So most of y'all know me. I'm Josh Morgan. I'm the city engineer for the city of Danville. I'm pretty much just going to hand it over to Aaron Hathaway with Gresham Smith, our consultant on the Streetscape project. The goal today is just to let you all know where we're at in the process, what the plan looks like right now, and then just get some feedback and keep you all informed. So, Aaron, whenever you're ready.
Sure, thank you, Josh.
Oh, hold on, Aaron, I wanted to add real quick. If mute your mics unless you're wanting to speak. Sometimes we can get some weird feedback.
Yep. Yeah, as Josh said, my name is Aaron Hathaway. I'm a landscape architect and project manager with Gresham Smith. We are the consulting firm on this streetscape project. Hello to those of you that I've met before, and nice to see new faces as well. The presentation that I'll share today was one that we gave the commission back February 1st, I believe was the date, at a public meeting. So I'm just using those same slides that we use at that, and I'll try to kind of run through it and not spend too much time dwelling on anything, but to allow us to have some time at the end to have some conversation. And you know, by any means along the way, if there's something that sparks a question, feel free to jump in. This is by no means any sort of formality. So, right, with that, I'll go ahead and get started. Again, this was for that commission meeting, but just in general, the slides talk about who the project team is as an introduction. I touch on the downtown master plan, which really influences a lot of the decisions and the outcomes led to this project in particular. Our early planning work on the streetscape. We touch on stakeholder engagement. We've had a number of different conversations with a lot of different folks throughout this process and what we've heard from them. Our final plans and our final materials, and then what to expect moving forward and what would the construction look like. So as I said, you know, Gresham Smith is the main consultant on the team. I am a landscape architect, but we also have a lot of engineers. So this project is in good hands. We have John Eckler, a senior transportation engineer who's leading the transportation side of things. He has once worked for Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, but now works with us. So he's intimately familiar with the cabinet and their requirements, and he's really great at what he does. And he has a support team. We also have Nikki Bowden, who's a utility engineer on the project. So really thinking through all the complicated things that come along with a downtown streetscape renovation project like this. Where we started, thinking about the downtown master plan, which we worked with Brevier Architects on. I showed this slide as a kind of a reminder that even before the downtown master plan, the city had done a lot of things to start to prepare for work along Main Street. You know, the restriping plan and the quote road diet, you know, helped play a major part in while at the time it may have been pretty controversial to get implemented, I think it started to help frame how the core downtown could be safer. You know, taking over some of that streetscape or the street lanes and putting it towards parking and creating some bump outs helped kind of set the stage for a real road diet in the future. The downtown master plan, these are slides showing some of that work that we did. We talked to a lot of different people during that process and heard a lot of things related specifically to the core of this project that we're working on now. A lot of it was about, you know, how do we improve our open space, our shared public spaces? How do we create more desirable amenities downtown for people to go to? How do we make downtown more appealing as a destination? Safer streets came up over and over again. People had constant stories about different problems that they came across downtown when they were crossing roads. We heard a lot about accidents. So people really kind of informed us that they wanted downtown to be a destination. They wanted it to be a place where people stayed, where people walked around instead of just drive through it. in the master plan, the end sort of themes, big themes that we created were connect people, places, and culture, make streets for people, and infill blocks, lots, and buildings. And so one of the three main themes was specifically about making streets for people, right? Instead of designing roads just purely for vehicular traffic, how do we make sure that that public right-of-way also thinks about people in that planning process? These were some slides that we shared during the downtown master plan, just beginning to think about what the sort of main street looks like and how some of those things could be addressed. Shortening crosswalks to make those street crossings much safer because you're going shorter distances. Bumping out the curbs, that also allows for people who are waiting to cross the road to be more visible to traffic that's going through and making turning movements. We talked about bumping out the curbs mid-block as well, that those places could be long-term parklets, whether businesses could use them or people could use them along the corridor. Incorporating that sort of leftover empty space that you see on the striping of the roadway, that space should be put back into the curb area where pedestrians are. And then eliminating unnecessary turn lanes at intersections. You know, we heard a lot about third and fourth intersections being really problematic from a safety standpoint, and also fourth and Walnut as well. And the traffic crash data, we looked at that, which also reinforced that notion that those corners are really problematic, and what do we do to address those? And that's evaluating the turning movements that are happening there, making sure that those crosswalks and that intersections are safe. So when we started this project, the Downtown Streetscape project specifically, we came up with this original or our first kind of framework for what the plan could be. This has been shared quite a bit throughout the process as just sort of here's our initial take on what we could do for making the streets you know, bumping those curbs out at the intersections, reducing some turn lanes. So some of those intersections have been kind of changed up just a little bit. And we started to think about them in different zones, which relate back to the streetscape guidelines. You know, the orange that you see on the screen, that is sort of the main pedestrian clear zone. It's maintaining this walkway, making sure that nothing gets in the way, because there's a lot of stuff on the street, right? There's trees, there's trash bins, there's light poles, there's bike racks, all those things. We want to keep those out of that main pedestrian clear zone. The purple is the amenity zone. So that's the extra space that, like, outside of walking and sort of navigating through, you could stop, you could rest. There could be dining, there could be other things in those purple spaces. And that's also where all those other things could go, where seating could go, bike racks could go, those types of things. And then the dark purple is a building zone that's right up next to the building. That's a space kind of right outside of that building that could be for additional things that the businesses themselves like pull out onto the streetscape. It could be dedicated to them. And so this was sort of where our starting point was. We started to talk about, well, where might we see bumping out curbs? You know, right in front of the Bluegrass Pizza and Pub, there was a temporary parklet there. You know, it seemed to get a lot of support and excitement around that project. And so how do we bump the curb out to make that permanent? And where else do we do that along the corridor? And so this was kind of our first take at where those things could happen. You know, we took this project, like I said, to a lot of different groups of people. Our initial conversation was with businesses and property owners along the corridor, and this sort of map you see up at the top was a working drawing that we had during that conversation where we heard a lot of input from folks. We took the plans also to a public meeting hosted downtown to get more feedback about the framework plan that we showed. We talked to KYTC the entire time. So early on, we met with them and showed them that framework plan and talked to them about, okay, here's our traffic studies, here's our modeling if we change these intersections, here's how these intersections could be better and safer. we're doing these curb bump outs to slow down traffic, and changing those corners and those turning radiuses so people slow down as they go through downtown, so it's not just a speed zone, especially when we think about 4th Street, that can be pretty fast traffic there. We met with city officials and administrators, folks from the fire and the police, showed them these ideas and these plans, got different feedback. We also met with the Streetscape Committee and have shared our ideas and our plans with them as well. So the final streetscape plan looks like this, and I'll jump in and zoom into different parts and different pieces of it on the rest of the slides. But here's sort of the big ideas that happen with the plan. First, you'll see this dark purple line going down 4th. That is the utility burial along 4th Street. So all of those utility poles with overhead wires, that's all going underground from roughly where we're showing the line to past Walnut. So all of that will be buried underground. The other thing we're doing is, of course, like I said, improving these intersections that are identified on the screen. So all of those, we've gone through to make certain changes to make those safer. We've planned for these permanent parklets, these areas where the curb bumps out and has sort of this amenity space that could be both dining, it could be seating. There's a lot of sort of thinking about this in a park system almost along the street. And then, of course, all of the sidewalks and the amenities will be improved in this plan. So all of the things that are out there today behind the curb will be removed. That's including the trees, and there'll be new stuff put back in place. So safety, whenever I presented this to the Planning Commission or the City Commission, I had John Eckler with me, the transportation engineer, to talk through these things, but I can act like that for a minute and kind of summarize what he said. And we've been working side by side along on this project. But like I said, the traffic calming, bumping out at those intersections really helps cars slow down right there at intersections, and it helps the traffic to see pedestrians on those corners. We eliminated any unnecessary turn lanes, which I know specifically on 3rd Street, the dedicated turn lane right now causes a lot of problems with pedestrians crossing across Main Street. So we're planning for that. And there's intersections, there's new traffic poles at each intersection. Those poles will be the nice matching kind of the style of the light pole downtown. And those will, have high visibility signals. We'll do things like pedestrian lead time intervals. So when the signal changes, the pedestrian will get the crosswalk sign first, and there'll be a sort of a period of time before the signal changes green to allow the pedestrian to start crossing before traffic gets the go. So those are sort of the traffic things that we're implementing to improve safety. Now, this does mean our plans do change parking a little bit along Main Street, and we've had a number of conversations with different folks about what this parking means. So existing parking along Main Street as it is today, there's in this sort of view that we're looking at between 4th and 3rd Street, there's 56 spaces out there today. In the proposed project, there'll be 36 spaces along Main Street. But we are adding 3 extra spaces on North 3rd because we're getting rid of that turn lane. And we are adding 6 spaces along South 4th Street as well. So overall, we're losing a net of 11 spaces kind of in this core of the project to those permanent parklet spaces. We also show on the screen, there's a couple of red dots. Those are handicap spaces. We're intending to keep those spaces that are out there today and making sure we have the same number in the future. And the ones just in front of the church are Sunday only spaces, and we have that noted there. But so you can see that the sort of circle dots are the counts along kind of each block on the sides and where those spaces kind of shake out. The pedestrian spaces, so it's interesting, we highlight the park up here. The park is 21,500 square feet, and the amount of pedestrian space we are adding to, in addition to the sidewalks that are out there today, and like not including those sidewalks, we're adding almost the same amount of square footage as the park. So that's 19,800 along Main Street, and then the adding also 2,000 down on 4th Street and 3rd Street. So essentially, we're taking the size of the park and distributing that space in this project. So it's pretty remarkable. Within that space, we right now have 32 bike racks, 19 waste receptacles, 34 benches, and approximately almost 4,000 square feet of cafe seating area. So what does that look like when we zoom in? This is kind of like zooming in on the corner of, this is 3rd Street right here and Main Street. And so what we're trying to do, back to sort of some of the feedback we got during the master planning phase, is provide safe and accessible downtown spaces. We're trying to activate the streets, through providing shade. We're providing a various lighting, which I'll get into that in a minute. We're, creating spaces that ultimately adjacent businesses could use, pulling the activity that's happening indoors outside into the public world and allowing those kind of businesses to be outside. And hopefully that's an economic driver for downtown, right? It's a valuable thing that these businesses recognize that could be useful to them. And in the end, we're just trying to create a vibrant corridor that people want to walk through, that people want to come and visit, that they want to stay, and create kind of a lasting experience. So from a tree canopy, I mentioned that, the ginkgo trees out there right now would be removed from the project. There's 27 trees out there right now. We'll be replacing those trees. We're adding additional trees. And I think, one thing to note is there's no trees on 4th Street right now, but we're excited to be adding trees on 4th and some on 3rd as well. So here as we zoom in again, this is right in front of the park. This is what those tree spacings would look like. Those tree spacings are about 40 feet on center. Depending on utilities, of course, sometimes those get in the way of those existing utilities. So we're making sure that we're planning for that. In addition to the trees, we're providing we are planning for infrastructure below ground. We're using these things called soil cells around the tree roots that kind of help the tree grow long term. And we're also suggesting tree species whose roots do not kind of push up the sidewalk. What you see today, those ginkgos are pushing up sidewalks and creating some like challenging accessibility problems out there. So the species that we're selecting are both really resilient to urban conditions, the heat, the concrete, the salt. We're making sure that those trees are going to be healthy long-term in the future so that they last a long time. Lighting, I mentioned lighting. This is a big piece of the project. We want to make sure that the space downtown is not only active during the day, but at night as well, that people feel safe down there and that it's exciting and vibrant. So we have a lot of different lights that we're suggesting. Vehicle lighting, of course, is important to make sure that that the roadway is lit from a safety standpoint and that pedestrians crossing the street are very visibly seen at night. We also have pedestrian lighting along the sidewalks. We have bollards, and those are lit as well. Those are those short little lights along sort of edges of the sidewalks for safety. And we have cafe lighting too in certain spaces. These are overhead little cafe lights that I'll show you a picture of in a minute. And so if we zoom in, this is what that looks like. Right now we have the pedestrian lights in between the trees, sort of at a 40-foot space interval. And the vehicular lights are kind of at the ends of the blocks and also at the mid blocks. And we've done, photometric lighting to make sure that this is all safe and designed in a way that the roadway will be lit. And here is an example of the cafe lighting over certain bump out areas and certain parklets. Not all of them receive that, but some of them do, because we're trying to provide a variety of spaces, right? So the cafe lighting space would be a very bright spot at night that would be very active, but then there's spaces where there's just bench seating and it might have some lower pedestrian light, just to provide a variety of experiences in the corridor. So when we started to think about the materials for the project, you know, all of the stuff that's been talked about is just sort of the framework, the curb, the spaces, the lighting, the trees, but what about the pavement itself? We thought about the goals of that pavement, and you know, we of course first and foremost want to think about accessibility. We know that there's issues downtown right now with accessibility, with some of these bricks being loose and causing some problems long term. We want it to be timeless and sophisticated. So this core of downtown, these 2 blocks are very special. We've known that. We've heard that a lot from different people over the project. You have these beautiful historic architecture building facades that we don't want to distract from, right? We want this space to complement those and sort of set the stage for the architecture to shine. We also want to think about long-term durability. We're putting a lot of effort and a lot of money into this project, and we want it to live up long-term, something that the city can easily maintain. So we're making sure that the decisions that we're making, we think about maintenance in that. And of course, we want the spaces in the end to be vibrant, something that people are excited to be in and feel comfortable at. So we looked at the existing streetscape guidelines and thought about how they set those up. And again, we talked through this at the beginning of the presentation, the building zones, the sidewalk zones, and the amenity zones. And the guidelines right now, the building zones uses brick to designate sort of that building zone area. The city has run into some challenges with that brick, and ultimately, recently, they've replaced that with concrete instead of brick. The sidewalk zone right now calls for a diamond score concrete along the main walkways. And the amenity zones call for a stamped concrete that has the appearance of stoned as in stain and is stained with a color. And that stamped concrete right now, as you see in this diagram, goes out towards the crosswalk areas. So our approach to the downtown core is to recommend a little bit of a different approach because we think this core is, like I mentioned, it's very special. It's this historic moment. But we think recommending for the building zone, we agree with the city that the concrete sidewalk should just extend up to that building. It's a lot easier for implementation for the contractor to build concrete right up next to the building instead of the brick pavers. But in our plans, we show a tighter scoring joint of the concrete to still designate that building zone visually. You'll still be able to tell that where that building zone ends and starts. The sidewalk zone, we're recommending in the downtown core, a classic sort of really wide sidewalk, 10 feet wide is what we're showing, with straight saw cut joints. And the reason we wanted to go with straight joints in this area is because ultimately, if the city needs to come back and work on the underground utilities in the areas, you can easily saw cut with those joints, pull the concrete up, do the work, and put the concrete back, and it matches really easy, and it will look like you never even pulled that up in the past. And then the amenity zone, we are recommending in this core downtown a paver application over a concrete base. So what this does is it complements the stamped concrete right now that's in the guidelines, but it allows for easier maintenance over time. You know, it's a classic look, but the long term, the city is able to pick those pavers up, cut out the concrete base, work on the utilities below, put that concrete base, and put the pavers back in, and it'll look like they were never touched. You know, the concrete base underneath will support the weight of pedestrians, and it'll basically prevent those pavers from shifting in any way long term. So it'll be a smooth surface. We won't have to worry about shifting or changing. So what does that look like when we kind of take a picture looking down on the streetscape? We have, again, the sort of 3 feet of the building zone right up next to the building. You can see on the diagram there's tighter scoring joints in the concrete. And then we have the 10-foot sidewalk that's clear from anything that gets in the way. And that goes all the way to the crosswalks in our scenario. So that way that there's like an accessible walk as you walk through the core. You'll never have to walk over pavers unless you walk into sort of the parklet areas. So where there is parking still along Main Street, there would be a 6-foot sort of standard amenity zone where light poles would go, trees would go, waste receptacles would go. That's all in pavers, and that's sort of off to the side of the main sidewalk. And then where we bump out for permanent parklets, that expands and is almost 14 feet of space outside of the pedestrian zone, where you see in this example we have a couple of benches that are facing each other. We have bollards along the edge of the sidewalk that are lit to help people feel sort of a separation between traffic and the space on the sidewalk. And then another item that we heard over and over from people was that the center median reserved for delivery traffic has that everybody loves that. It's working really well for everyone, especially the businesses downtown. So we've kept that in place, and what we have proposed is replacing the asphalt of that median with a paver that complements the pavement that's behind the curb, that breaks up the asphalt and provides another level of texture and visualization in the core that we think will be really timeless and beautiful. So again, this is kind of, if we zoom in on that amenity zone, this is what that pavement pattern looks like. It's a linear European pattern with really light gray, subtle textures to complement the concrete sidewalk. And really, the approach here is to be almost a neutral zone on the surface to let those beautiful, colorful architectural buildings shine. We don't want to overwhelm this corridor with lots of color and introduce other materials. So we felt like it was best to have this neutral color that will complement those buildings. Of course, we're suggesting the granite curbs along the face of the sidewalk, really a timeless element that will hold up and be able to be reused for forever, really. So again, I'm going to show a couple of renderings of what these spaces would look like. I wanted to remind everyone again how beautiful these buildings are and what that backdrop for these spaces would be. And I'm showing you this because in our renderings we don't have the ability to drop those in, but just imagine those beautiful, colorful buildings behind these spaces. But this is kind of what looking across the street at a permanent parklet might look like with cafe seating. You have the lighting, cafe lighting in certain areas. You have trees to provide shade. And again, those trees are species that have high limbs, right? So the trunks of them grow really tall before they start limbing out, and they limb up really tall rather than hanging down to provide that sort of space below them to see signs and see businesses' facades. We also have these social areas again with seating in the shade and the lights. Here's the permanent delivery median with the different pavement treatment as well. And we just kind of rotate and look back. We're kind of our backs to the building right now and looking out back towards that street and that streetscape and what that would look like during the daytime. Again, this is what it looks like today out there. And here's what it could look like in the future. And here's another instance right at the corner of Main and 3rd Street. And here's what that might look like in the future. Again, we are bumping out at these intersections. We're providing bollards along that corner to help protect those pedestrians. We'll have new pedestrian crosswalk signals. we'll have all the amenities that a streetscape will need, trash cans. We're, working with all the utilities to make sure that existing utilities are maintained. Fire hydrants, for example, will need to be moved out to the curbs where they are. So we've worked with them to make sure that those are planned for the future. Again, here's another look at that. And one thing that I didn't mention when we were talking about lighting, we're also providing outlets at every tree and conduit running under the ground. So that way in the future, if there's different changes that the city wants to implement, they can tap into the conduit and be able to introduce kind of new technology as we think about the future. And other streetscape components, we saw on the renderings, we have the litter receptacles and the benches that are prescribed in the Danville streetscape plans. Here's what sort of that cafe lighting looks like. This is at the Arts Center right now, and what those lit bollards will look like. Again, planting, I mentioned this before, but we're specifying trees that are urban tolerant. That means that they can live when they get salt thrown on them. We are supporting them with the infrastructure for a healthy life with soil cells. We're also thinking about seasonal interest and of course high branching patterns. So one of the main things that I think you all are probably interested in listening to and hearing about today is the maintenance of traffic and what the construction phasing will look like when this all kind of gets built. So I have a couple of diagrams to walk through to talk through this, what the plan is. So we've worked, really closely with Josh and his team and thinking about it with other stakeholders about how we could do this, right? This isn't a really large project in comparison to some of the other projects we've worked on. For instance, in Lexington, we've been working on Town Branch Common, which is 2.2 miles of corridor right through the middle of downtown. So we think that the project could happen fairly quickly. And, all of the things that we're suggesting here are recommendations to the contractor that will be put in our documents to them, but ultimately we'll work with them to make, if they have suggestions to do it better, we will review what they suggest and possibly change this. But this is sort of our recommendation based on our experience and knowledge of how construction can happen. We've identified that, of course, the Brass Band Festival in June is a really important event that happens in Danville, and we want to avoid that both at the beginning of the project and at the end of the project. We don't want to interfere with that. So we're telling the contractor he or she can't start until after the Brass Band Festival. So the start date of construction will happen right after that. And phase one of the project will be set up sort of what you see on screen, where work will happen on the south side of Main Street. Two-way traffic will be maintained, but the lanes will sort of be shifted up north, but those traffic lanes will be maintained. And one thing I want to say right off the bat is that pedestrian access through these corridors will be maintained at all times. So the contractor will have to work with the city to phase that pedestrian traffic. Sometimes it might be on the outside of the sidewalk, sometimes it might be on the inside of the sidewalk, but they always have to maintain an access into buildings along that corridor. So at no time will that be interrupted. There might be temporary kind of crossings, but pedestrian access will always be there. Utility work will start on 4th Street, so sort of burying that utility will be the first thing that will happen before the streetscape elements come back in place. There'll be one lane of traffic heading south on 4th Street, and that's sort of a setup for a trial run for a permanent one lane south of Main going towards Walnut there. So then phase 2 will happen. We'll just kind of switch the work. They'll finish the work on the south side of Main, and they'll start work on the north side of Main, and the two-way traffic will get shifted to the south side. So both of these phases, we're telling the contractor should be mostly complete by, the middle of October, beginning of November. Now, will all the trees or all the benches be in place? Maybe not, based on lead times for materials, but the hardscape pavement of a sidewalk will be substantially complete, as we kind of would imagine being able to use that space will be complete by October. And then the utility work, again, on 4th Street will probably continue throughout phase 2, especially going underground north of that. And what we are going to tell them is that they can't work from, middle of November all the way through and past Christmas, because we know that that's, a sensitive time for downtown. We want those businesses to be able to be, open and running like usual without any interruptions from construction. So that's a sort of time that we're blocking off from the contractor, that they can't be working downtown during that time. So the 3rd phase of the project will be addressing the median work, right? So we talked about replacing some of that asphalt with a different pavement treatment. It is flush pavement. Again, I probably didn't make that clear, but that work shouldn't take the contractor very long to do. And we think 10 days for each median is actually what it'll take them. So that's going in, tearing up that asphalt, digging out the base, installing that concrete and the pavement on top of it. But to do that, we think they'll have to shut down the entire block from traffic. Now, pedestrian movement will still happen. That's, again, pedestrians will be able to walk through this corridor the entire time. But that block, we're going to tell them that they can only do this at 1 block at a time, right? So for instance, what you see on here right now is the block between 4th and 3rd. We're allowing them to shut down that block from traffic for 10 days, up to 10 days. Maybe it'll take them less. And then they would be complete with the work, and they would switch over to the other block between 3rd and 2nd and do that work within 10 days. So during that time, they will probably still likely be finishing up the actual streetscape work on 4th Street. All the first and 2nd phase will be burying those utilities, and the 3rd phase will likely be coming back and replacing the sidewalks there. So again, this work wouldn't happen probably until spring, because we don't want them to work, throughout the holidays. So this will be happening in early spring. And then the project, we think will be completed by May 15th, if not earlier. From here, I guess where we're at today is we're working on final construction documents and permit plans. Those will go to KYTC shortly. As I said during the presentation, we have worked with KYTC throughout this process, so they know what's coming. We've already made changes based on their feedback, so we don't see any surprises from this permit process. Another thing we're doing is upgrading the fountain right at the corner of 4th and Main Street. Those are just minor upgrades to make that fountain a little bit more special. We're connecting the space around the fountain to the streetscape plans to make that more integrated and feel like a moment. We're intending to provide seating there, so it's just kind of not just right now today it sort of feels like a walk-through space where you don't really sit and stay, but we're trying to integrate that into the plans. So we're working on that right now. And then once the permits come back, we'll put the plans out to bid to select a contractor. And the construction won't start until after the Brass Band Festival. So with that, I didn't hear any questions during the presentation, but I'm happy to talk through anything with anyone. Or I can also switch back to any slides that we want to look back on and talk about.
Mary Conley has a few questions, if I might ask.
Sure.
So my first question is specifically the 4th Street utility work starts when?
It would start the same time as construction, right after the Brass Band Festival, yeah.
Okay. The McDaniels parking lot egress, has that been terminated?
Can you explain to me which one that is?
So they are close to 2nd Street on the north side.
Here?
And, yep,
No. We haven't terminated any current egresses on the project at all. We've left every kind of drive open. We do at each of those have, you know, pedestrian warnings that they're going to be crossing a driveway. That's through pavers, tactile warning pavers. We have bollards at those kind of crosswalks as well. So at this point, we're not getting rid of any entrances or exits to parking facilities.
thank you. The 4th Street, does that permanently turn one way south?
Yes, it is. Well, we're not changing any of. Sorry,
But I
this
mean, like,
probably should
it's one
show.
lane. I mean, one lane. That's what I meant. One lane.
Yeah. One
Okay.
lane from Main Street to Walnut. That is a goal of the cities, but it's a trial during construction to make sure that there's no problems from doing that, right? So the way that the streetscape is designed, it could be striped as one lane, or if it doesn't work out, it could be striped as 2 lanes. So the room between curb and curb is still there to allow for 2 lanes if it needs to be.
I have a question.
Sure.
This is coming from David at Carol's Bridal Shop.
Uh-huh.
Have you done any surveys about the amount of bicycle usage? You indicated there will be a 32 count bike rack, or at least one somewhere. Have you done any surveys as to the need for a bike rack? And I have a follow-up question.
We, I guess, have not done any specific surveys about the use of bikes. And one of the things we heard during the master plan was that people don't feel comfortable using their bikes because of the traffic downtown. Now, part of the master plan was thinking about, you know, we discussed and had a conversation about, do we show and provide the space for bike lanes, dedicated bike lanes in this corridor along Main Street? The, I guess, overwhelming response that we had was Main Street should be for pedestrians, and that the bike facilities could happen on the parallel roads, you know, whether it be Walnut or Broadway, that that those facilities would work better on those side roads where there's less traffic, there's less pedestrians. And so the reason for having bike racks in this area are, you know, they still could navigate up along 3rd and 4th Street, and they would, you know, want to provide spaces for those bikes to be kind of locked up and secure. You know, right now, the way the bike racks are downtown, they're part of that post and parking system. Those won't be there anymore. So we're providing bike racks kind of at certain kind of corner locations.
You did a pretty good job of explaining the trees that will be replaced. You did everything except identify the species of the tree. I was a member of a very select group of people in 1991 who chose that ginkgo tree. Unfortunately, the nursery somehow provided us with females. Would you care to identify the variety of tree?
Yeah, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I don't have them memorized, but the majority of them are oak trees. Several species of oak trees. One where, you know, it's our intent not to provide one species across the corridor. The reason for that is, you know, ecologically long term, if we had one species, if something came through, you know, and caused a problem that killed them all off. So, you know, it's our practice to provide a variety of species. So it's mainly oaks. I think maybe there's 3 oaks that we're suggesting. We're also suggesting a London plane tree, which is a street tree that's found all over the world. It's very tolerant, just a super hardy, really wonderful street tree. But I can get you the list if you want to know the specifics. I think maybe there's 5 total or something like that.
That's a blood good cultivar of the plane tree. Well, the reason that the ginkgo trees were selected was because a great many shop owners did not wish to have the facade of their buildings covered up. So the columnar ginkgo, and they've been in there for 31 years now. It was, and as I say, there's the problem with the droops, but that was not a mistake on our part.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I'm finished.
Thank you. Nina, it looks like you're speaking, but I can't hear you. I can't. Maybe you can try chatting using the group chat.
Has there been any thought given to the appearance of the center lane after it's been used for several years, as far as oil marring the surface?
Ask that again.
Has there been any thought given to the appearance of the center lane, the delivery lane, after several years of usage with oil stains in the middle of it, leaking oil from automobiles?
Right. Sure. Yeah, I mean, the pavement, I mean, we're certainly making sure that it can handle the traffic. I think your comment's a great one. We show in the renderings a light paver, but it's probably a good idea to use one of the darker grays that we're suggesting. I mean, these pavers are similar to a concrete where, spray down could wash things off. So, I mean, there'll be wear on it and it'll probably patina and look different over time, but I don't think it's a concern enough to switch it back to asphalt or to suggest asphalt.
Well, it seems to be a discretionary part of the overall project, the use of pavers.
Question from Ivy and Grace Brown Boutique here. It's Cody and Savannah. Are they going to be offering free permit parking in the back lots during all this construction phase? And also during the 10-day block being shut down, we operate a spa type business. If we experience a lost income, who do we turn that into for, a refund of that? And when was this sent out to be voted upon, I guess, is another question of ours. Thank you.
Aaron, you want me to answer those?
Sure.
First question, parking permits. Yeah, we need to have a conversation about that. That's one of the things I got out of the walk, walked around Friday and talked to everybody. We've got to figure out a way to offset, because those, we'll have one side or the other of parking closed for probably 4 months. So it's a long time to lose 20 Main Street parking spaces, or close to 20 probably. So we need to have a conversation here internally. I'll talk to codes enforcement and come up with a plan how we can utilize the parking assets that we do have to kind of offset that problem during construction. And hopefully that leads to some long-term solutions too, because that's an issue everybody's worried about right now. Offsetting lost income. That's a bigger question. That's probably not a question I can answer right now. Let me ask some higher up folks about that. I'm hoping, of course, I have this vision of like, oh, it doesn't have that big of impact, and the result is so great that you offset that in the future with all the wonderful new business that you get because Main Street's so nice. But I know that's a very optimistic view. So I'll try to stay in reality with that, and I'll talk to some folks about that. And Aaron, I think we need to talk some more about that 10-day closure. I still have a lot of concerns about that we kind of need to talk through and figure out if there's not a different way we can do that. And also, this kind of goes to a bigger conversation about when we get a contractor on board, some of this may change slightly.
Yeah.
We want to give the contractors, when they bid, we want to give them enough flexibility that we don't drive their bids way up because they're having to jump through a lot of hoops for us. So we try to give them some flexibility with how they do things. But we may get a contractor on board and they may say, hey, we can do that in 3 days if we throw a bunch of people at it. Do you want us to do that? And we will say, yeah, let's do it. So I think this is kind of the biggest impact. We're establishing, all right, what is the largest impact that could occur here? And then we can kind of start to whittle that down to something that's reasonable, that can still we can still get the project done. And then voted on. We really didn't have a voting process. I mean, we've kind of tried to put this in front of the public and put it in front of the commission as much as we can over the past year to get input and kind of slowly get it to the place that it is now. We didn't really do a voting process on it. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll chime in on that. In addition to the 3, I think it's been 3 now, public presentations to the commission. We did have a day. I think the picture on there captures it. That day when we showed the framework plan, there was a little bit of not necessarily voting, but it was absolutely the time when we were asking, where do you want to see these permanent parklets? Like, here's some images of what those could be. Which ones do you like the most? So we had a bunch of conversations about that. Like I said, we had an initial kind of kickoff with business owners and property owners in a virtual setting like this. Unfortunately, COVID has been problematic throughout the whole process. So, and then there's also been the public. You've had a website, Josh, posted as well with all the project information throughout.
Yeah. I want to add too, maybe there's some confusion there. When we say that 10-day closure, that's just the street. The sidewalks and the pedestrian access will still be open.
Yep.
So I don't like closing the streets just because that just causes a lot of issues. But when it comes to businesses, and also during the time that work is happening in front of your business with the sidewalk, we will keep pedestrian access open at all times, unless they're pouring the concrete in front of your door that day. There may be a closure for a very small amount of time, but the goal is to keep access to businesses open all the time. Foot access, at least.
Hey, good morning. This is Brian Little. We own the Chase Bank building here. I wondered if you guys had looked at what impact this will have on the wash water or the water movement and any drain movement that you'll have. I know when we did this project on 3rd here, we had some issues with the city and state on pushing water down toward us. So what kind of impact is that going to have? Have you guys anticipated any movement of that wash water?
You mean just rainwater, stormwater that falls? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the construction plans for the project, all of the sort of Main Street corridor will have new gutter drains, right? So those will all be replaced mainly because the sidewalk curb is being pushed out. So we'll have all new drains there to capture that roadway water. We'll also have a system of drains inside the curb. The pedestrian zones will have some area drains as well because it's just such a larger surface. So we're capturing the rain on the sidewalk that's being collected below ground. We're capturing the rain along the roadway, and all of those will be tied into the existing storm system, piping system underground. So that's part of our permit that we have to submit to KYTC. We evaluate the watersheds and size those drains and pipes accordingly for the stormwater events.
This is Carol at Carol's Bridal.
Mhm.
I have a couple of questions. First is, it seems to me that this whole plan is very skewed towards helping restaurants with all the bump outs, but taking the parks away really hurts businesses that those bump outs aren't going to help at all. Where are our customers supposed to park? A lot of our customers are taking out heavy packages like tuxedos and gowns. They're not going to want to walk 3 and 4 blocks.
Yeah, I think that we've tried to create a balance, right, of the parklets and the parking spaces. We meet with,
Taking 20 parking spaces is not a balance.
well, we're losing 11 total. And, we hear from other groups that they want more bump outs, right? But we pretty much held firm with where we're at right now. And part of the thinking, I guess, long term, and maybe this is back to Josh's comment about being optimistic, is that there'll be more foot traffic downtown, right, in these kind of corridors, and so getting businesses, more patriots, right, patrons, because they're walking this corridor, they're coming down to these restaurants, they're using the sidewalks, and they're seeing these businesses that front those sidewalks. And the bump outs, I'll say, I know this isn't helping with the parking, but it's not just solely dedicated to restaurants. I mean, we're using the cafe tables as an example, but certainly there could be use of it from a variety of ways, from retail, commercial, all that. You could use that space however you wanted.
I'm not going to put wedding gowns out in a bump out. I don't believe Nina secretary is going to move her desk out into a bump out. It in all reality, it truly is skewed to restaurants. I mean, most of the Farmers Bank's not going to move out onto the street.
Yeah, and we've tried to leave the parking in front of those businesses that wouldn't be using the bump outs in a way that, like you said. So we've tried to leave parking in front of those areas that would want to use it more.
Well, Josh, one thing with that, with much limited parking, you're going to have to keep restaurants, because they're the big abusers of this. Their employees they take the parks on the street because they don't want to pay for parking for all these different employees. I mean, we have that problem in our block every day, that the city's going to have to do a much better job of policing that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was kind of referring to earlier, that hopefully this leads to some more overwhelming, parking reform about how we handle downtown. I think this might be hopefully the catalyst that causes that. And I think another thing to think about these bump outs, and I know, the state has already told me that they were not going to allow parking spaces within 50 feet of intersections. So some of the parking spaces we're losing, we were going to lose anyway as part of this project, because they're holding tighter to that than they used to. And so in a lot of the bump outs are parking places where we're losing one at each corner at least. So those are probably going to go away anyway as part of this project. And I think, when you're really looking at the grand scheme of, we have, hundreds of parking spaces that, maybe 1,000 parking spaces you need for downtown to function. We're going to lose 11, which, and I know the location matters. I know that matters, but I think we can, if we fix our parking kind of procedures, we put some new signage in, we let people know where they can and can't park and feel comfortable about it. Hopefully we can get, at the end of this, we're in a better place than we are now. I mean, that's really my hope, at least.
I think signage is going to be very important, but as I say, we have got to keep these people who work downtown off the streets, because
we heard that a lot. We heard that a lot Friday when we were walking around. Yeah,
I mean, it's ridiculous. Some of the people right down the street from us, they park out here every day. I can tell you the cars by looking at them.
Yes, I just want to jump in and say I agree with Carol. That's my biggest concern, that we are losing 20 spots in a 2-block area. And I will tell you, as we do a lot of large custom framing, that is going to put a huge strain on our business, because people are not going to walk a piece of framed art all the way around to Broadway.
That's right, Julie. They're not going to carry 10 tuxedos out of here and have to walk that far.
No. So 20 spots on a 2-block area, to me, is a real detriment to our retail and our businesses downtown.
So who will those conversations include whenever it comes time for parking? Is that a meeting with Bridget Lester? I mean, what does that look like? I know that whenever you guys came around on Friday, you said that we would talk about that more in detail at a later time, but that's going to be the huge, huge driving factor here. And, you know, generally speaking, I'm a team player, but if you're going to take all of our parking and then complain that our employees are parking in certain areas when there's nowhere for anybody to park, then that's going to put business owner against business owner, and that's not the kind of community that we want either. So there's got to be a real conversation had real soon.
Yeah, it'd be with Bridget. I'll bring in Bridget, and I don't know, police probably needs to be involved as well, just because they have a good mindset about this. They're going to be dealing with it on the weekends. So I'll bring in them, and we'll start the conversation, and then talk to you all, because I mean, you all are the ones that deal with it every day, and see what a good solution is. Yeah, I mean, we need to have that soon. You're right.
Hey, Aaron or Josh, can you tell me how many spots we're losing between 2nd and 3rd Street?
I don't know that number off the top of my head. I would have to look back at some existing aerial photos in our survey to get that. I just don't have that count right here in front of me.
I think the slideshow that we just saw showed that we're losing 20 spots between 2nd and 4th Street. But then they're picking up a few on the side street, so there was a net something, but 20 spots off of Main Street in a 2-block area, to me, is a lot. And that's what that slide presentation just showed us.
Right, I have the parking slide up that shows that. You're right, there's 20 missing between 4th and 3rd. I don't have the individual breakdown between 3rd and 2nd and 3rd and 4th. I don't have that number on me. The 3 spaces that we're gaining on 3rd Street are right here, right close to the corner of 3rd and Main. And then the 6 spaces we're gaining are down on 4th Street between Main and Walnut.
So does the 20 you're losing include the 2nd to 3rd Street block?
Yes, there's currently, I pulled up Google Earth and tried to count real quick, and there's about, it's hard to tell exactly. It looks like there's about 15 on the north side between 2nd and 3rd currently, so that goes to 10. And I think there's 14 on the south side, so that goes to 8. So you're losing
a lot of spaces. I mean, that's going to really hurt all these businesses. I mean, it's a really big deal to all of us downtown. I mean, if we can't get people to come, we can't stay in business on Main Street.
I mean, to be fair, we can't get people to come and park down on Main right now because people don't like to parallel park, but there's just not enough parking. But it's really disheartening whenever you look back in the lots and they're half empty, but the city won't do anything about it.
Yeah, I just think this is a big problem that has not been addressed, and it's going to kill a lot of downtown business.
Yeah, there has been a lot of conversation about signing those city lots in a better way, that after, that it can be open to the public on nights and weekends.
Well, but to be frank, nights and weekends isn't good enough because the bread and butter of our business is Monday through Friday, especially as, you know, a restaurant type business for breakfast and lunch. So where it is kind of them and or whatever to open it up after 4 p.m. on a Friday and you can park there through Sunday, it doesn't help us during the week.
Well, and I think, you know, we're trying to create a, you know, we've got two goals. You know, we've been tasked with the goal to like, hey, let's make Main Street a place where people want to go spend time. And, you know, that's what Erin was tasked with, and that's what she's tried to create here. And I think parking is an issue that we, you know, I'm aware of at least, and I hear the concerns, but I think the concerns, the problems you all are having, the concerns you all are having aren't solved by this. And you know, I don't want to downplay this. I don't want this to sound like I'm downplaying this. A few of these few spots that we're losing. I mean, 20 is a lot, but this is a bigger problem than the 20 spots. I really feel that way, and I feel like it's going to come from more than just this project. But like I said, this project should drive us to fix it. I don't know what the solution is. That's why I need to bring in other people that will have to actually implement and enforce the solution, which is you can't have just, you know, the issue we're dealing with is free unlimited parking on Main Street in your busiest part of town. And we're seeing the results of that now, and it's not really functioning. But there's solutions to that other cities deal with and have implemented different ways to fix that. And we've got to do that. We can't wait any longer. This project's going to make it even more of an obvious thing that we need to fix, especially during construction and even after construction. Because downtown's going to feel, I mean, it's going to feel a little less car friendly. Like honestly, like that was one of the goals we were told to do on, you know, in the downtown master plan was it's going to feel a little less car friendly, a little more pedestrian friendly. That we were told to make it that way with the downtown master plan. And hopefully it one day leads to a healthier Main Street. But the parking is something that is a big thing that, yeah, it's got to get resolved.
No, like I get that. Like I know that, you know, losing those 15 spaces or those 20 spaces or whatever is not like going to be the end all be all to what is causing the issues downtown. But like if we already knew this was a problem, why weren't there steps taken to maybe address said problem before we made it worse? Coming from, you know, like if you read through the chat, there are businesses that had no idea this was going on. You know, the Streetscape emails that come out, they only go to certain people. A lot of us were not brought into the conversation until it's kind of far too late. So if we want to make downtown more vibrant, okay, that's awesome. And I'm glad that we're doing that, making it more pedestrian friendly. You know, I run, you know, 30 miles downtown all the time, and I would love for the sidewalks to be better and be more friendly. But, you know, if you edge out all of your businesses, you're not going to have a downtown for people to want to walk to.
I think I'll just chime in and say, I mean, I'm very appreciative that you all have shown up today and have voiced these concerns. I think it will help move the city in the right direction to solve this parking problem. You know, a lot of the responses we've heard from people in the public so far has been, this is great, we love this. It's been received very positively. So to hear these concerns, I think that the city will take this truly to heart and try to get this fixed. I think, you know, the 20 spaces that we're losing, there's an issue now, right? It's not that parallel parking on Main Street is the solution. It'll be a different way.
I think, to be fair, Erin, you've been put between a rock and a hard place, because you're just doing the job. It's not your job to fix all of our city's issues. So unfortunately, you have to be the one to be the first hand to hear our grievances. But like you say that the public has been super excited about the changes that are being made. I wonder how many members of the public can actually understand the streetscape, because I'm an educated woman and it's difficult. You've got to do a deep dive to figure out exactly what's going on. There's not been a lot of transparency. So to hear, oh, the public's really excited about it. Well, maybe for what they know about it. Do they realize that it's going to tear up the entire town for a year? Do they realize that, you know, it's going to make it more difficult to do some of their everyday tasks? I know that, you know, there are certain people that don't necessarily work downtown, but they come downtown to visit their favorite businesses 2 or 3 times a week. That's going to change their patterns. So basically, I just hope that there are much more opportunities for us to actually sit down and problem solve before ground gets broke, because this is not going to be a fun time in downtown. Do I think that the end result will be beautiful? Absolutely. Is it necessary? Absolutely. But there have to be like more conversations had before you just go tearing up the whole town.
So then our next step will be to, real soon, I guess, Josh, to meet with Bridget, come up with some ideas, and then we'll touch base with all of our downtown businesses again, and we'll have maybe a little more of an intimate meeting about, you know, taking steps forward. Just a suggestion, question.
Yeah, that's the next step. I'm glad we had this conversation today. I'll say this. I hate that people feel like there's been a lack of transparency in this process. That will bother me for a while, just because that's one of my goals in this job now, is that we communicate really well to everybody what's going on. And I thought we had, and I was wrong. And so we'll try to do better with that. I want you all to know me very well you will know me very well by the end of this project, that's for sure. But feel free to contact me, to reach out, to find out what's going on. Because our goals are the same. I mean, at the end of the day, our goals are all the same. We just want this to be an amazing place. And that's what we're trying to do. You know, I know we're not going to get everything right, and we're not going to always, there's different ways to do this too, right? There's different ways to go about this process, and not everybody's always going to see the same thing, but we all have the same goal. And I want y'all to know that, and just always feel free to just come down here to City Hall and talk to me, really, or call me and tell me, come up there and talk to you. I'm not that far away. So I'm definitely willing to stop by and see you if you have questions. And this parking thing is something I've thought a lot about, but like I said, I need to get other folks involved to figure it out. Because it's something, it really does drive your downtown economy, is how people can access places. And I know, we got to focus on pedestrians, but at the end of the day, people do drive. They drive places. Everybody uses their cars, so we got to accommodate that as well. So I appreciate everybody being on here. Yeah, I'll get with our folks here about parking, in short term and long term. Short term for construction, long term for what's this look like after we're done. Because like I said, my dream is that people are flocking to our downtown after this project's done just to see it. And parking will be a problem, and we've got to solve it. So thank you all for hopping on here this morning, and letting us know what's going on.
I'd like to add to,
yeah.
And I guess I'm getting some feedback, and I apologize. I'll just send an email to everybody. Oh, is it gone? Okay, so I'm with the Heart of Danville, and I'm going to be working very closely with Josh, because he's going to be busy through this whole project. But again, I'm going to be sending emails about this project as it moves along and how it will directly affect you before it becomes time to affect you. And I'm talking about weekly and possibly daily, for that matter. So read my emails when I send them out, because they're going to directly affect how you move forward and plan, how you receive your customers and what they're going to be dealing with. And it's going to be a process, and we appreciate everybody's patience. But I think in the end, I think once we work out some little issues, and just to let you know too, before you leave, there's going to be issues with garbage collection, and that's going to have to be talked about in addition with parking, because both of those are challenges that directly affect our businesses downtown. So, Josh and I walked downtown, what was it, almost 3 months ago, and tried to inform everybody, and we went door to door, and we did that again last Friday. And, I had over 50 some odd people on the email list. And unfortunately, again, today we only had up to 24 people. So there's going to be other people that are not going to know exactly what's going on. So please talk to your neighbors and let them know what's going on. Tell them to watch this publication that's going to be posted on the city's website so that they're aware of what's going on. So again, if they have questions, they don't feel like nobody's talking to them, and they can get a hold of Josh and visit with him about any of their concerns as well. So thank you for listening to me.